Hello and welcome to this review of my 8BitDo keyboard. I was sent this keyboard fairly recently by 8BitDo themselves. I asked for one after I had several video requests for it from our viewers, and it seemed like a really cool keyboard, so I dove on it pretty quickly. Nowadays, I almost never get sent vintage keyboards anymore, and I only have a small number left to review, one of which is coming up next, by the way. And as I'm entirely reliant on donations, a retro keyboard like this is one of the few chances I get to touch my roots again, so to speak, hence my excitement. And possibly because my roots lie with vintage keyboards, I can probably appreciate this keyboard more than most reviewers will. See, as my long-term followers will probably know, I like keyboards that sound good. Feels are of course also very important, but let's say I put an above-average emphasis on sound, which incidentally is also why I'm not always a big fan of modern keyboards, because those are almost invariably built around the MX architecture, which sounds like shit, hence why it's popular to use aluminium cases, dense chassis, case foam and switch lube, all of which serves to shut the switches up as much as possible. And many other modern switches frankly aren't much better, and that's why in reviews of many modern keyboards I don't spend too much time talking about the sound, because frankly there's not that much to say. But if you have switches that actually sound nice, you really want to amplify the sound instead of deadening it, and in that case you're better off with a case that's roomy and plastic, rather than dense, rigid and metallic. This is also why the AT is the fullest sounding Model F, for example. Here it is compared to a metal chassis 4704 Model F. And the difference is similar with other switches like Alps, for example. I've given loads of examples of this phenomenon over the years though. Now with this being a retro keyboard, they went for, guess what, a roomy plastic case. And I don't know whether they did this intentionally for sound or just for the aesthetic, but the result is pretty damn good sounding if you put some nice switches in there. Yeah, so speaking of a good sound, the switches in this case are the V2 version of Kailh Box White, which is a click bar switch. I originally wanted to put Zeal Clickiez in there to make the most out of the sound, but I figured that I might as well review these switches first and then put out a separate video where I do just a typing demonstration of this keyboard with the Clickiez in later, because a V2 of an interesting switch like Box White deserves a review of its own. There are a few differences with the original box switches. These V2 switches have a black color scheme for the housing rather than a white one. There are some adaptations for LEDs and backlights. They've got fixing pins, which the original lacked. They use longer springs and they come pre-lubed, although that's not the case for these white ones, presumably because clicky switches don't always respond well to lube. In terms of key feel difference, I like the newer ones a little bit better. They're slightly lighter in key feel, and this brings the tactility out a smidge more, which is good because the original box whites were barely tactile at all. I don't think they changed the click bar, just the return spring, but it's good, I like them. Sound-wise, they're advertised to be better, but of course I wanted to try that out for myself, so I put them next to each other. These are the V1s and these are the V2s. I actually think the sound of the originals is noticeably better. They have a fuller, deeper sound to them, closer to Alps, whereas the newer ones sound tinnier and more high-pitched. I'm not entirely sure what causes the sound difference, but before you ask, I did pick positions on the board that sound the most similar to each other to minimize positional interference. Overall, I like them, they're pretty good. Of course, if you want to use them, make sure that your board supports fixing pins, as quite a lot of keyboards overlooked that you need to put holes in the PCB for them, but otherwise, it's all dandy. Worst case, you can cut the fixing pins off with a knife or something. Now, the keyboard itself has some nice things too, apart from the roominess of the case. First of all, it's pretty damn gorgeous in my opinion. This is the NES-inspired version, but there's also a really nice-looking Famicom one with a more red color scheme and double die sub-legends. Very nice. That one is possibly even better looking than this one, I think. I should state that although I say it's roomy, what I really mean by that is empty, like an acoustic chamber. The board itself is not that big or tall for a TKL. Specifically, it's 37.5 by 16.5 centimeters, or in imperial units, a large keyboard the size of a small keyboard. Yes, that is apparently how they measure things. I really like the knobs for the volume and Bluetooth as well. It's that kind of flat dial that was on tons of speakers in the 90s. There are also 3 buttons here, one for pairing, one for profiles, and the middle one is for on-the-fly macro recording, which, yes, you can do, no software needed, and it's super easy to use. Just press the programming key, then the combination you want to save, and then the key you want to save it to. One limitation I found is that with this method, it seems like it doesn't take repeat keys, which is a bit weird. That may be a bug. Hopefully they can fix that. Still, I love that you don't need software to program it, because virtually all keyboard software is mega shit, so not needing it is a big plus in my opinion. It does have a software suite though, if that's what you prefer. To clarify, there are no dedicated macro keys on the keyboard itself. I think you can program these B and A buttons, but the main point is these things, which are basically giant 2-key macro pads. And yes, they still use MX-compatible hot swap sockets in there, but you do need to put a switch in there with sufficient return force or they won't reset properly. By default, they come with Gateron green, but I swapped one of them over for a Zeal Clicky, the stiff version, and the effects are immediate. Listen to this. The macro pad comes with a 3.5mm aux cable and it plugs into one of 4 ports at the back. And though you might think that these ports all do something different or whatever, love that they're marked ABXY by the way, very geeky, but they don't. It just gives you the opportunity to connect 4 of these at the same time. Maybe use a few as a foot switch or something, they're definitely big enough. The keyboard comes with one of these macro pads by default, but you can order extra ones for $20 each. The keycaps are thick, die-sublimed PBT and inverse die-sub for the red keys. They're pretty nice, chunky, they feel satisfying, and should last for a really long time. Fat arrow keys too, like a Monterey keyboard. Nice. It does only come as a TKL in ANSI layout, which is a bit restrictive, but if that's something you're in the market for, I think this is a pretty cool choice to be honest. By the way, probably don't need to mention it, but it doesn't have a backlight. Then again, if that was what was gonna stop you, this probably wasn't the keyboard for you anyway. It's $99 on Amazon, discounted to $84 at the time of writing, and although that's not cheap for a keyboard, it's honestly not as expensive as I would have thought. A lot of these retro or throwback keyboards tend to be pretty damn tanky on the wallet, but this is nowhere near as bad as I thought. Of course, it is an enthusiast product, but I honestly really like it. I later even found out that this company, 8BitDo, are known mainly for making a whole bunch of controllers, which of course means that they are actually, Satan. But they did earn some karma points back with this, I think. Maybe they may find redemption yet. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard. And don't forget about the Clickiez typing demo coming out soon.